I'm going to call the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for November 8th, 2022, calling it to order. Do I have a motion to approve the October 11th, 2022 Planning Commission minutes?
So be.
Do I have a second?
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, who was the abstain?
I abstain. Since
Okay.
I wasn't here.
Okay.
Move
So
on
we
to
have-
item number 3, staff report.
Short on this one, 57 single family home permits. We've seen a significant drop in even questions about when new houses are built on. The builders I've spoken with are all things on pause for a bit. Although I will say Eagle Ridge has 26 units up there, 2 have sold in the last week, 4 more went under contract. With definitive closing dates and another got cannot figure out where our market is in relation to the national market. There's obviously problems nationally with the interest rates and the demand issues that are out there, or the supply issues that are out there. So, you know, I think we're in okay shape from the standpoint. We've already got more than we had last year. So from a revenue standpoint on permits and covering the cost of inspectors, we're doing okay. Commercial hasn't changed. We're still working on finishing up the commercial that has been issued in the basically last year. A lot of those are finishing up now. Next month's agenda will have a redux of the Herzog, but it'll be in a different zone with a different kind of conceptual layout. They're going to do a conceptual plan. It'll be here for next month, as well as a residential subdivision on the north side of Second Creek, just west of Second Creek. Will be here for sure. I think that's it, unless there are questions on specifics. Obviously, McBee's is under construction, you've seen, and Richardson Street Plaza is moving dirt as well. They're the 2 new things. So.
Does anyone have any questions? If not, we'll move on to item number 4, public hearing. Going to open a public hearing on revisions to fence regulations. If any members of the public wish to speak for or against the item, please identify yourself, give your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. I'll first call on staff to present an overview of the proposal.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We have been requested by a couple of aldermen to put the fence regulations up for discussion related to primarily decorative fences, the definition, and very specifically whether or not vinyl coated chain link fences should meet that. While preparing for this meeting, I went through and did what I call a statutory interpretation review of our ordinance that was written in 2000. I don't know, was it 2 or 3 or 4, somewhere in there. And I found several other issues that if we're going down this path, let's fix all of it now. So you'll see all those in the draft that's in your packet. The draft in the packet has, yellow highlights on the areas of significance that need to be discussed, that are potential changes from where we were. So there are several items before you, and I believe the citizens that are here to speak are here on the decorative fence, vinyl coated fence issue. But there are other issues. When we get to the item on the agenda number 5, we'll be able to get into them a little more in depth.
And Jack, the questions you're asking us to answer tonight is on the summary, right? 1 through 6. Is that kind of what
Those are the issues that we need to look at. Yeah. Because at the last board meeting last week, we had someone come in and want to talk about electric fences. So I spent the Wednesday and Thursday of last week kind of figuring out a way to add electric fences into this. And those are completely up in the air. I just put something in there so that we'd have at least a bookmark to discuss.
Okay, do we have anybody from the public?
Good evening. My name is Patricia Ward and I live at 400 Eagle Avenue in Smithville. I would like to speak tonight about the fence on the property. I was born and raised in St. Joseph. My husband Frank and I owned and operated a printing business for 25 years until he passed away from cancer in February 2013 at 48 years old. I moved to Smithville in November to be closer to my son Adam and his family. Adam helped me by purchasing this house and I rented it from him. Before I moved in, I spent the last $4,000 of my husband's life insurance money to install a black vinyl coated chain link fence. I knew I did not want a plain gray chain link fence because I thought the gray looked old and not what I wanted for my yard. So I went a step up to put in a nice black fence with 4 or 5 foot gates that matches shutters and roof on my house. I didn't need nor want a fancy or more decorative fence. I think it would have looked totally out of place in my neighborhood. So I chose the best I could afford to be nice looking, no maintenance, and functional to keep my dogs safe in the yard so I didn't have to go out with them every time I let them out, especially at night. And it also makes me feel safer since I live alone. So here we are 9 years later, and we have been notified that a permit was never pulled for this fence installation. I moved here only 10 months after my husband passed away. He was my best friend and I was still reeling from that loss. I had never had a fence installed before, so I had never thought about asking about a permit. I don't see why I must be penalized 9 years later for this. I cried all night long after my son received this letter and told me about it. We have done nothing but improve this house and made it look much better than it was when I moved in. So many neighbors have walked by and told me how nice this fence looked, and they still do it 9 years later. I have polled my neighbors and people who walk around the neighborhood, and they've absolutely no issue with it. In fact, they think my fence is beautiful and compliment me on the way it looks and the way my house looks and how my yard's maintained. I think my house and yard look better than most in the neighborhood. Did my installing this fence deter from the value of the property? I think not. Plain and simple, I live on Social Security and I cannot afford to tear down my fence and construct another one. Can't I pay the permit fee and any penalties and be allowed to keep my fence? Would you forgive me for this one transgression? I'm not only asking you, but I'm begging you to let me keep my fence. And at this point, I would like to ask for a review and a change to the fence code. And I'm aware that it will take some work. I suppose at the time the chain link fence was added to the code of the ones not acceptable, that the vinyl coated variety might not have been in existence. I don't know, or maybe not popular. The code doesn't specifically exclude vinyl coated chain link. I understand why a gray chain link fence might not be acceptable because I didn't even want it. I know there've been other inquiries about installing vinyl coated fencing, so why not take a look at the existing code and make the change to allow it? Smithville residents would then be able to improve the look and value of their properties without breaking the bank.
Time's up.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. I don't really have a speech prepared.
Name and address, please.
Adam Ward, do you have the Smithville address that's in question, or do you want my physical address?
Your address.
9901 North Revere Avenue, Kansas City, Missouri, 64154. I just wanted to say that I'm kind of disappointed that there's no statute of limitations. There's no grandfathering in, and I feel like the fence looks great and there's other properties around us that look terrible. So I've already given the speech once to the other board, so I'll keep it short and sweet. But, like Mom said, we've done nothing but put money into this house and improve it. And, it doesn't seem fair to wait 9 years to all of a sudden, audit our location and send us a message in the mail saying you must comply within 30 days. You can't imagine what that does to me, and my mom. So I just, it almost, it just doesn't make sense to me. So I'd like you guys to consider, changing the rules. And, I'd also ask for, an audit of some of the properties around here that, my grandmother lives at 6 Jolisa, 2 doors down. There's a house with an open garage door and trash over the front yard. And we're sitting here arguing about a fence that, in a house that's been well maintained. So, if the goal is to gentrify the area by putting in decorative fences, we probably should start cleaning up the garbage first. Thanks.
That's it. Seeing no more members of the public left to speak, I call the hearing closed. Move on to item number 5, revision of fencing regulations. This is just a discussion, Jack, or do I have to have a first and a second? with
Well,
this?
I think it's available for either. But I think we ought to have a discussion first to see where you want to go. We have a proposed draft ordinance that no matter what you do, will have to be probably tweaked a little bit with motions tonight if we get there. But I think if we start with the general discussion, as I intimated in the public hearing intro, and I kind of described fairly in depth in my staff report memorandum, when I did the statutory interpretation review of our current code, which is the last document in your packet, I found several issues that came up that from a statutory interpretation issue are very problematic that we need to address either way. One is the way it's structured. You can't have front yard fences in anything other than a double frontage lot, according to the way the code is laid out. It was never intended to be that way because when I got here, they were permitted. All the way we're interpreting it now is the way it was interpreted when I got here, and we never made any changes. And because there was never any significant push to bring it forward for an amendment, I never did a statutory interpretation review. That's the biggest issue is currently there are no front yard fences unless you're on a corner lot or a double frontage lot. I don't think that was ever the intent. So I think that one is one of the items in the discussion. And like I said, most of it is a statutory interpretation issue. The bigger picture for me, and you'll see most of the pages are devoted to the red markings on various subdivisions throughout town, including the north of the river part of main construction area and south of the river of the original parts of town. All of the red dots are corner lots or double frontage lots that this rule applies to. So it's a rather significant amount when you look at the percentages. I didn't do a lot count, but my guess is that we're probably at 20% or more of all the lots in town, in the subdivisions in town, would be subject to this double frontage, corner lot or double frontage lot issue. In it, to get there, I've given you the first draft of one that you can look at with several provisions highlighted in yellow. Those are the issues that should be primarily discussed. I also have the items at the back of the staff report, the 6 main items that should be discussed so we can figure out where you all want to go. And then the remainder of the packet are the historical nature of it. The 1966 ordinance, which was as vague as it could be. The 1997 electric fence ordinance that went in, and then followed by the changes in 2004. And as I indicated, the reason the 2004 changes came in is because we adopted the International Code Council residential code back then, which included permits are required for fences. And my predecessor looked at that 1966 ordinance and went, I can't enforce that. How do I issue a permit with that? It was so vague. So they drafted one, pulled one from over in St. Louis area, Ellisville, I think it was, and used that as the format, including the decorative fencing on corner lots. So that's how we got here. I'd throw it to you all to discuss, ask me questions about whatever you want to do, however you want to handle the 6 questions at the back of the staff report or the draft section 400-350. As it relates to that, you will note that this is significantly different than the other one because of the structural problems with the other ordinance and how it was interpreted. I've proposed a new ordinance that has a decorative or ornamental fence definition, plus a electric fence definition, plus a front yard fence definition. So that it's easier to actually regulate this if you have definitions versus the way it was before, bouncing around, redoing the same thing over and over. If you mess up the words, then it gets confusing. So this way is one way to avoid that. And I'll leave it to you if you have questions or how you want to go. The last item is in our August meeting, I presented that staff memo to you on the initial stuff. It included the fence looks of different types of fences, some rough costs for the fences to see where y'all wanted to go. I did not put that with this packet because it was more of a staff report scenario, not intended for discussion and debate. It was more intended for, do we even want to go there? So, but that information is still accurate if you are wondering about that. So that's all I have at this time.
So Melissa, do you want to maybe just go look at the questions and try to answer those in order, or what are your
On the
thoughts?
summary, like define the
Yeah,
phrase decorative
at least
fences.
part for our discussion. I mean, I don't know.
I think that would be the thing to do. So we'll take number 1
Okay.
first. Define the phrase decorative fences to include or exclude those provisions deemed appropriate. So that probably ties back and you kind of look at that. Item number 1 under section 400.350, which is where it lists what is not considered a decorative fence.
So I guess the only thing I would say is, I mean, when you look at this fence, I mean, the vinyl coated fence, right? I mean, that does not look bad.
No.
No.
It all comes down to personal opinion and choice on this. I agree. I mean, I think the intent of the metal exposed is what makes it non-decorative. And
What I'd like to, I mean, I'd like to, not only allow this type of fence, right? But you know, as long as we can have some provisions that they have to be maintained, you can't like have rust, all that other stuff. I don't see a reason why this fence can't be allowed. It looks fine. I've seen this fence all over. It's all over the country. I mean, people have this fence and it's fine.
but specifically chain link, we can't have wire mesh that's coated in
Correct.
black. It's
Yeah.
got to be
Yeah.
coated chain link.
I
I-
second what you said, looking at the pictures.
Yeah.
That looks very nice to me.
And I know that, you know, there's HOAs that'll prevent that, but that's what an HOA does. That's what it's there for. So I don't think that people that don't live in an HOA that choose not to should be forced to live under HOA type rules when it comes to something like this.
So do you need a motion
Well, ultimately, I think from a
Eventually.
discussion standpoint,
for each question?
yeah, let's just discuss it. And then if we want to get to a actual ordinance draft, we have one.
Right.
And we'll have to tweak the language. Depending on how many changes we have, it may be best to get a general consensus where we're going, then we can come back for the actual vote at the next meeting, once all the changes are there. Because if you start making a bunch of changes, it's me writing it down and Brandy taking notes. And we'd have to get it to the board you know, if it was approved, we'd have to get it to the board by next Tuesday. And the ability for us to do that, I'd rather make the changes as we understood them and then you guys read it and go, that's what we wanted. So that would be my recommendation, but I have it here so that you can do other options. To clarify on, as I understand, at least three of y'all's points, the chain link.
Unless coated in black.
Yes.
Vinyl.
Well, and that's what I was gonna
Vinyl.
say. Is it only black or can it be green? They have green vinyl coated fences?
I mean,
That was what
I would say
gonna ask.
white would be okay too, right? I mean,
I've only seen green, brown and black available, but I'm sure there's somebody that makes white. And that's the,
Coated in ink color, because people paint it, and that's what we gotta be careful of. We don't want.
right.
but
It
can
has to
people
be
paint,
vinyl
a-
coated,
can
right?
people paint a picket fence green?
Yeah, we don't have a,
Well, what's the difference between that
Right.
and this?
Right.
Unless it's commercially coated, you know.
right.
Because
And that, I think
because the
that's,
paint's gonna have all the rust and stuff.
well,
you're talking
paint
about
is
in
not
this one.
vinyl.
Right.
So vinyl coated is a very specific term.
So
It's vinyl coated, and then somebody paints over top of it, it's still vinyl coated.
Oh, yeah, yeah, okay, I see
That's
what
what
you're
my point is.
saying. Yeah, yeah, that you could paint vinyl coated fences. Yeah. Paint it
And the
black
other
or
thing,
whatever
too,
else.
is it says it's only 4 feet tall.
Mhm.
Through the city ordinance saying we only can have a fence 4 foot tall.
In your front yard.
Oh,
This is only front yard fencing that we're talking about.
Yeah, at schools, it can be more than that and a
Mhm.
couple other. places.
Backyard fences can go 6 feet.
Yeah, and the gist of it also, I mean, we gotta make sure, and it's in here, is that, you know, you can see through it, you know, and things like
Mhm.
that. That's the main thing that I would be looking for.
I would
Um,
not want to bog us down with specifying colors. Cause that's just gonna open us up to
yeah.
conversation after conversation of, well, what shade of green, what shade of,
Let's just say well-maintained vinyl
Coated.
coated chain link fences.
Well, we
okay.
have a property maintenance code that requires it to be
Yeah.
maintained, so we'll address it that way. And that includes if it starts leaning, that's how we usually get fences fixed, is when they lean outside a certain percentage outside of plumb, they have to be repaired.
So
So,
to be specific, we're only talking about allowing a vinyl coated chain link, not a regular chain link.
only vinyl coated. The definition that's in the proposed draft is literally what's in the existing ordinance. Exactly. However, I would suggest that, and I'll have to figure out a way to address what is not considered decorative, because vinyl coated chain link should be in. I don't want to put it in the what's not, so I'll have to structurally work on how it goes in there. There is another question I would ask you, and that is wire and wire mesh. I think that's another one of those subjective interpretation. What's that mean to each of you? You are now seeing 3-inch square or 2-inch square, what would commonly be called cattle panels. Instead of the big cattle panels of wire, they're smaller and they're using them for decks to use as your guard. And they're now also becoming part in fences. So now in those scenarios, they're not vinyl coated. They're,
Like,
So-
it look like American field fence.
yeah, and they're squares, 3-inch squares that are completely encased in wood, in a panel. But that wouldn't be allowed versus a wire fence, which would be, barbed wire obviously couldn't happen in residential, but you could have regular wire fence, except for it's excluded. Wire mesh would include, chicken.
That's the first thing I think of is
Yeah,
chicken,
same.
Yeah,
chicken fence.
or the rabbit fence, that's a wire mesh. Technically, so are the giant wire mesh, a cattle panel that's got the 3x6 wire, that's technically a wire mesh. So you have wires or wire meshes. Snow fences has generally always been interpreted as green or orange fence
Plastic
put up,
fence.
or sometimes it can be that wood picket that's tied together with
Mhm.
wire. the stuff that's traditionally you see along the highway in Kansas when you're driving on I-70 to keep the snow from blowing out.
On the other thing is that orange, like vinyl.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they make green as well. That's a
Okay.
snow, we would
Okay.
consider that a snow
Safety
fence as well.
Yeah.
We use it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
safety.
Yeah, you see safety fence use it all the time, but it is also considered a snow fence when it's used for that purpose. So that's orange or green are the two colors for that.
Any of the stuff you just mentioned wouldn't necessarily be considered decorative.
Well. And that becomes the true question is it decorative? Is it not? Generally, everything, depending on the person putting it up, would be considered decorative.
Yeah, that's very,
Yeah, it's another one of those vague terms. It's in there solely called it's got to be decorative, and decorative in the way they drafted it, decorative can't be this. And it gave you very specific exclusions.
So are you looking for permissive rather than,
I'll draft it however I need to make it work so it's enforceable. What I really need is, do you have problems with all wire mesh?
So are you saying you want to have what's included in decorative? I think we'd be better off leaving it the way it is, what's not included in decorative.
Right, and ultimately, no, what I'm saying is wire fences have all kinds of different looks of wire,
Right.
and wire mesh fences have all kinds of different looks of wire. And in particular, those two, keeping it as they are, all wire mesh and all wire, because you have that nautical wire
I haven't
fence.
seen any. I'd one in my yard.
I mean,
I have the new ones that are, like you said, with the decks, it's wood posts with wood framing.
It's
with
industrial
metal.
look
Yeah.
and it looks good on decks.
It looks good at like restaurants and stuff too.
But not as a yard fence.
I think,
It might look good.
I think if we're just gonna exclude it, we can maybe say chain link unless coated in vinyl. I
Yeah.
mean, just
No,
add
I'll
that.
get the drafting part of it. What I'm more concerned is, are we excluding everything we want to exclude from decorative, or are we excluding more than we want? We don't need to come back, if 5 years from now and tastes have changed and these wire mesh panel things that we're talking about that are starting to become more popular with the wood, they sell them in sections. They're
Well, you could still,
pre-constructed.
How do you define that? I mean, I don't
That's-
even know.
How would
Yeah.
you define that as?
permit process too, though, if they brought in what they're going to use, you could determine whether that's decorative or not.
Well, that's the problem. Decorative is
That's why we're here.
subjective. That's why we're here.
We want to be
Personally,
you want to be, yeah.
From my perspective, I would say a vinyl coated fence is decorative. But our ordinance says it's not.
Right.
And that's the difference in interpretation of what a term means versus some specifics.
I'm okay with this.
And that's fine.
Mhm.
Wire mesh could be interpreted to be, like you said.
It's a
chicken
broad
wire. Yeah.
range.
But chain link is wire mesh.
It's a
Yeah.
very specific
Now,
wire
but
mesh.
it's
that's
Vinyl
defined.
coated wire mesh. Are we saying vinyl coated wire mesh is okay?
Yeah. Yeah, and ultimately, that's the question.
It shouldn't be. I mean, it's,
Because wire mesh has a clearly, in my mind, a clearly different interpretation than a chain link, because chain link has a very specific. It's links
Yeah,
of chain.
When you say
Yeah.
chain link, everybody knows what you mean.
yeah. So I just think if you just add something chain link unless coated in vinyl.
Well, could you not up there in your first sentence, sorry to interrupt, but a fence constructed of wood, metal, vinyl, or vinyl coated chain link? And leave the rest down below, like
Yeah,
standard chain link or something.
Yeah,
add to
that
the
part I
front
can,
or
that
the-
part I can
Double
craft.
confirm it maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
My bigger concern is, are we, if that's the only change, that's perfect. That's easy. I can fix that real quick.
I would make that pretty much the only change.
Okay, now,
That's my feeling.
sure, and are there any other fences out there that you don't think should be the type to be put in front yards?
So you wouldn't allow a 3-foot steel picketed fence like in the olden? you
No,
see-
no, in that one, that would be considered in my estimation, a typical picket fence with the, the
Yeah.
wire or the rod
Metal.
types
Yeah. as long
that
as
have,
they-
Yeah, and you see them all over pools and everywhere now. They're aluminum square pipe. Yeah, that would be considered decorative
So can a
Yeah.
double front lot have a privacy fence on it?
in
With-
areas where it's
Would it
allowed.
have to be, it'd have to be visible through more than 50% though, right?
Well, it depends where it's located. The purpose of the restriction on 50% is to, if you back up and your backyard is on a corner lot, for example, and your backyard has somebody's front yard entrance or their driveway in it, a 6-foot fence in that location would be problematic because they can't see to get out. It's not safe
Mhm.
and it blocks their vision and view. It's problematic. But if you have a double frontage lot where you have a street with your house on the front and a street with your house on the back and there's nothing else around you, for example, 180th Street on Rollins Landing,
Mhm.
all those
Mhm.
back up to it.
So I saw on the map is all John's neighbors except him.
Yeah.
That whole strip is red.
And that is what that is. It's a double frontage lot. If there was a front yard that looked at it, it would need to be the site obscuring, 50% site obscuring
50%.
max. Otherwise, it's a 6-foot fence and goes on. And the way I addressed that was with a front yard fence in the definition section. Front yard fence is a decorative or ornamental fence, which is defined above, located in a front yard, and that's a defined term in the code, that contains or abuts an adjacent lot that contains the primary entrance to the building or a driveway access to the lot. Or both. And that is solely for the protection of, a 6-foot fence in the front yard. And that would be a front yard fence as it relates to that. The secondary issue is if we have a provision that allows them on corner lots, do we also need to highlight what if you live in a regular subdivision lot that's in the middle of a block and you only have a front yard and your side yards and your back are other people's houses? A front yard fence up there, in my estimation, should meet the decorative or ornamental generally all the time, or do you want them to be able to go up higher? Because that'll require me to make a tweak to add something to the code that we don't have. But that's easy enough. That's easy enough to do. Does that make sense? Do you want in a case where it's a regular front? Well, I guess it would work theoretically. Yeah, no, it'll work. Because if your front yard abuts somebody else who's got a house on the front, it's got to be a front yard fence. Never mind, it'll work. I thought I just saw another hole and I
Confused me. I'm sitting there like, I don't know what you're saying right
Yeah.
now.
basically, if you live in the middle of a block, our current code does not allow you to have any kind of fence in your front yard. It was never intended to do that because they were issuing building permits for fences in front yards when I got here.
Is that what question 2 is though? We're
Yes.
trying to determine.
Yeah,
if-
ultimately,
Okay,
yeah, I think so.
alright.
The other problem is, even then, they allowed front yard fences to be, in that scenario, they allowed them to be chain link, non-decorative. The decorative only applied to corner lots. So everything they tried to do, they screwed up in that ordinance and then enforcement afterwards. So this will allow us to clean it up. Adding the vinyl coated stuff is real easy tweak. So yes, to answer your question, John, the way it's worded, two is answered in the, yes, they can do it as long as they meet the 50% and all that other stuff. It's in the draft.
That would be fine, because you've got historical houses that have,
Well-
old style houses that typically had a short little fence in
Mhm.
front.
Right. Well,
So that-
to be quite frank, the name picket fence
Mhm.
usually evokes a mindset of a little bitty picket fence in your front yard,
yeah.
which was illegal under our old provision. It was never enforced that way, not by me or the predecessors who set the tone.
Be
So-
okay with number 2 being fine as long
Yeah.
as it met the decorative.
And then,
So
Have we given you an answer on one?
Yes?
And we're on, let's move on to number two.
And I
then.
I
Do you
think
think we've
you
got
guys,
that?
yeah. Everybody was fine with that front yard
Yard
fence
fence,
as
yeah.
it's defined,
Mhm.
being in any front yard that's with the property
Yes.
next to you being front yard for somebody else or the driveway. And that's mainly to prevent 6 foot tall, 100% side obscuring fences being right up next to somebody's driveway all the way out to the road. That was the initial purpose for it. So I think two is contained in here and fixes that glitch in the old ordinance. 3 is also in here. And that's the circumstances when lots with multiple front yards, and that can be, there are lots in your subdivision that have 3 front yards. Eagle Parkway, I don't even know what that little street, 195th Terrace or whatever that comes off of Eagle Parkway into your subdivision, and then it goes north, Ironwood Drive.
Mhm.
There are 2 houses there that have, they're peninsulas. They have 3 front yards. So it becomes a lot more difficult in those scenarios. Interestingly enough, the original houses all there all had chain link. But it wasn't until 2004 that the new code came, which changed all those provisions. So the definition of front yard fence would answer 3 in accordance with everything that you guys said at the at our initial, do we want to go here in discussion in August? And it gets it to where we have just the protection issues of site obscuring versus non-site obscuring 4 foot. And now vinyl coated obviously has been answered as well. That's easy enough. So
So 1, 2, 1 and 2
And-
take care of 3. it
Yep.
Seems.
yes. By making those changes in the definition section, it considers all 3 of those and answers them in the way we've been interpreting other than the vinyl coated fencing.
So we're ready to move on to number 4.
Yes.
Should the electric fence provision be incorporated into the overall fence regulation scheme?
And this one was a head scratcher to me. Whenever I did it never went to the planning commission in 1997. It went straight from the Board of Aldermen. I didn't see anything in the minutes of the meetings before it. I don't know where it came from. There's no record of how it was brought forward, but it went directly to the Board of Aldermen. And interestingly enough, they use all kinds of references to the zoning code in it, but it's not a zoning ordinance because it's under a different type of construction ordinance. So with that being said, it would make sense to bring it into the zoning ordinance. If we want to go there. And the easier, the reason it's on the agenda is at the Board of Aldermen, we had a local business owner who has a business in the industrial district that would like to put up an electric fence. Because he had somebody break in and steal a bunch of parts off of cars in his lot. And he want electric fence in other communities is allowed. Why can't he do it? Both times he's asked over the last 8 years, we said, because electric fences aren't allowed unless you got a farm. And then it's got to be 75 feet away from your property. So
So with, I guess with this fence that he's looking to do, the electric fence, is it 75 feet away from his property or what is that?
well,
I
it'd
guess
be a
what does that
property
mean
line,
exactly?
yeah. Be a property- Well, I'm not 100% certain. Well, the secondary aspect of it is, I can't answer that question because he doesn't know. He just said, I want to do one. And I could do it inside or wherever, Jack. And I said, you could do it if it was allowed. It's not allowed. Period. So
These people, this, because
It's all over
I
the
can
map.
Understand why someone would fence industrial to keep people from coming in and doing that. On the other hand, you don't want somebody coming in and getting fried. I mean,
it's security versus safety. I understand the
Yeah.
debate either way. How do other communities handle it? Literally all of them.
But you also run into that same issue in an ag area too, right? I mean, that if your ag space is next to a neighborhood, you could still have people wandering off, kids wandering off to touch an electric fence.
In our particular, we have that in our subdivision already, the property we border a property that is mules and horses. And he has an electric fence. It's not gonna hurt anybody. It's gonna just irritate the daylights out of the mules. And it's gonna give somebody a good strong tingle, but it's not gonna kill them or give them a heart attack or set their pacemaker.
Yeah,
off.
those are pulsing fences in there.
Yeah, and then he's got his electric fence, but then bordering our property lines, he's got standard farm type fencing, no barbed wire or anything like that.
Horse panel.
But that's not what this person wants.
Yeah, my concern on that one is they border up against property, like they're right up against a place that's got a lot of families going into there every single night. So somebody goes leaning against the fence, they don't realize it's electric.
He's not one like prison fence, right? Is that what he's wanting?
Electric, he wants to have an electrified fence.
From what I.
That's all he
From
was-
what I gather, what I gather, he said, he's gonna continue to have the regular fence, right? But he wants to have an inside perimeter electric fence.
So you'd have to climb over.
You'd have to
the-
clear, you'd have to cross one.
The
fence
no climb
first.
fence first and then. get
But if you cut through
electrocuted.
one, can't you cut through the other? I mean, wouldn't insulated cutters cut a electric fence? You're the
Yes.
electrician here.
You can.
At least the kids, right?
There you go.
Scenario though, it's not kids.
volt
I mean, this was a
equipment, so-
professional crew that came in and stole $50,000
Correct.
worth of.
They're gonna get around it. no
Well,
matter
and like,
what.
yeah,
Be
But
protected
the
from
kids
the
that are
electric.
at the dance studio down the way, I mean, they won't be wandering to this fence because they're gonna get stopped at the pre-fence, right?
Right.
So.
The secondary aspect of it I want to highlight is if we're drafting an ordinance for one piece of property, we're falling down a trap that'll
Yeah.
come back and bite us. We need to look at it from a broader perspective.
as Billy said, if you can get through, if you got the equipment to cut off converters in about, minutes to get in and out, you probably have the equipment to get through the electric fence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's it solving?
But is this ordinance somehow prohibiting others from wanting to bring a business to the industrial area of
I
Smithville?
don't know if we want any fences in Smithville that will physically do damage to a person if they touch it. I mean,
Or
Well, I
you
mean,
have, you have a business here with the fence is,
I don't think
Yeah,
that,
it's-
I don't think that we don't have to have a fence that's something like of that severe, right? I mean, what's the plan? I mean, can we not have it the same as an ag fence? Or similar in scope?
ag
Yeah.
fence, but
Slow anybody down.
Yeah. I mean, you're
But I
talking-
don't really know what this guy wants, to be honest with you.
I guess I don't
Because-
know either, because if you're looking at an ag fence, that's a pulsating 15,000 volt fence and it's 0.0003 of an amp. So no, it's not gonna kill you. Yes.
like
you
a
can
9
grab
volt
hold of
battery.
it,
Yeah.
And you can hold on to it. And yes, it hurts, but you can
Mhm.
move on about life. Right.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
not
and
made
it- yeah.
where, if you're talking about a prison fence, now that's about 12,000 volts and it's about 100 amps. You will not walk away.
So
You may
it'll
fly.
kill a bird that flies into it.
I'm just saying, you're not gonna walk away from something
And
like
that's
that.
the scenario where we're talking
That's a
about
big
it.
difference.
The other aspect of it is a security fence has multiple meanings. And in addition to the electric provisions, there's barbed wire and razor wire scenarios that could be added. The draft I provided incorporates potential using barbed and razor wire in industrial and barbed wire only in commercial. Industrial, generally, we won't have any single-family housing or even apartments immediately adjacent to it. We will with commercial, but commercial has security concerns as well. So if they've got one, can they put a barbed wire security fence around the top as long as it leans in?
Yeah,
So
like
It should
the
lean
three,
out,
the-
I guess.
yeah, the three lines of barbed wire that's.
Yeah.
So you
Either
can't
that
climb
or the
over.
coiled type, it doesn't matter.
Needs to lean out
Yeah.
so you can-
Well, if it leans out, then it's over onto the neighbor's property if they
Well,
put it
then
on the
when
fence
they
line.
build the fence, they make sure
Yeah.
they set the fence back.
Just keeps
Yeah.
you from climbing it. You can still cut through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's designed to take out the non,
The moron.
yeah. Yeah.
Shouldn't, I'm sorry.
Should that go in the-
I didn't
should
mean-
that go in the
Yeah.
ordinance?
If you've got a, if you've got a dedicated criminal, they can get through either. None of
Did
it's gonna
not mean
stop
for
them.
that to pop out.
So let's go back to, let's resolve electric fence and then we'll talk more about the barbed wire and
Sure.
razor on number 5. So
Question, if whatever the decision is made here, I mean, is it, from what I heard, I think at the last meeting, Jack, was that it could still go to the Board of Aldermen can still make a determination, or is this gonna be the final answer?
No, everything you do here is a recommendation only. And it goes to the board for final approval, and the board can say, we disagree, we can change it all we want. It's ultimately, they need to take your recommendation into consideration.
And Mayor, what was the, I forget, what was the direction? Was it to have it come here first and then? go
No,
to
so
the
for
board?
electric fences, we weren't even really gonna discuss that today because that was not part of, what Jack is saying is electric fences isn't part of the current planning and zoning code. It's part of the Board of Aldermen.
Yeah,
It
it's
would
part
be
of
the decision of the Board of Aldermen. What he's asking is, should the electric fence provisions be incorporated into the overall fence regulation?
And if so, we
schemes.
can tweak them now.
So right now, it's not.
It's not, and
Correct.
then, so if we say no here, the board is still gonna.
If it
Discuss
gets to the
this.
agenda, yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I think the board, I wasn't directly at the meeting because I didn't know it was going to happen directly. I thought it was going to wait until December, but either way, he came and wanted this considered. So
It
We're
could,
talking
it could
about
go to a
fences.
future work session possibly, but yeah, it's this Jack is just asking, do we want to put it in with the fence provisions?
Okay. Then I would say no.
Does that include buried fences or
I like dog, even like dog remote fence stuff.
my
Yes.
perspective, they're electrified, but I wouldn't look at them from the perspective, if you read the ordinance on electric fences, they're danger to people. Those fences aren't.
No.
Put your collar on
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah, now,
we'll talk offline.
Moron rule applies.
And that is in the NEC. I could show it to you.
Oh, you realize we're being recorded, right?
Yeah.
It's your electric.
No.
so we're saying no to electric fences. Is that the consensus?
we can handle that at the board level differently later. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
That's fine. Okay, so I will make sure that, those provisions,
So are we
In
allowing
5.
electric?
Yeah, it's gone.
No, and
electric fences
4 and
stays
5.
stays in its, miscellaneous construction ordinances, not under the planning and zoning purview.
Okay.
yeah,
Um,
so we're on to 6, because we skipped 5.
Six now.
if we're not going to answer, if answer to 4 is no, then answer to 5 is irrelevant.
Relevant.
So, yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Now moving on to item number 6. Should the ban on barbed wire fences in all districts except agricultural be adjusted to include industrial and or commercial?
I don't have a problem with. or
We
with
have,
fence and
we have
industrial.
numerous, I will tell you, we have numerous commercial and industrial type fences currently that have the barbed wire on them.
So doesn't storage place,
The storage place
places
does,
have,
yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
CPC have to have it for the state regulations?
State regulations require them to have it in
Okay.
industrial to a certain extent. I don't know what all it was, but yeah.
So at the storage facilities, are they 6 foot or are they taller?
They've generally
taller.
been, yeah, some of them are 6 foot, some of them are 8.
Because I wondered if 6 foot was tall enough or if we needed,
Well,
That
the
could
other
be
aspect of
taller.
it is, in my definitions in here, I think the barbed wire provisions are missing from where I'm at. I don't know. I lost the second page of this, sorry.
8 foot in industrial.
Yeah, 8 foot in industrial, 6 foot in commercial. But I think I had the provisions that, electric fence. Yeah, it's defined up there. For some reason, I thought it was that the security apparatus had to be, couldn't be farther out than the face of the fence so that it leaned in. I've heard here from several folks that those fences should go out. Then I can change the the language that it cannot be farther out than the property line, so that they have to set their fence back so that the security apparatus doesn't go into the neighbor's property.
Right.
That's easy enough to tweak.
Yeah, 'cause you just do setbacks, right?
Right, yeah, you just do a setback that, you know, if they've got it, if it hangs out 18 inches, it has to be 18 inches back from their property,
And or from the easement.
from the property line, from their property line.
Cause you can build up to the property line right now. So
Yeah.
I'd say that's part of the build, right?
As long as
If
it's not in the front, but yeah.
Or the triple front,
Yes.
Had a double.
yeah.
These provisions related to barbed wire, et cetera, would not change the other regulation. So a 4-foot fence in the front yard applies across the board. All that still is the same.
And can we make sure when if we do go with this, we exclude B4?
Yeah.
Cause we
that
don't
would be
want,
easy,
yeah, cause we don't want, that is still considered commercial, but we don't want
Yeah.
barbed wire in downtown.
To be quite frank, I would suggest that we only do it in B3 because B2 and B1 are ones that are
Well,
often,
and I1 also, right?
well, any
Yeah.
industrial district is
Yeah.
not gonna, but B3 is the one that's most likely gonna use it.
Yeah.
B2 is offices and B1 is neighborhood, you know, real low impact stuff. That's gonna be right in the middle of residential, so
They're like.
You could have a B1 that has a dumpster that wants to put barbed wire on to keep people from using it. So,
Yeah.
you know.
yeah. But
just-
end of the day, I would say if we're
The
going to allow
daycare.
commercial, that it be only
But you're going to
in
go-
B3 districts.
B3 industrial is different.
Yes. One and I2.
So we would do B3 and then industrial.
And
Yeah, any industrial district. And I would prefer to say any industrial district, because if in 20 years there's a change and we create an I3, we don't have to go back and change this.
That's fine.
all industrial.
It's gonna basically call it industrial. then.
Yep, industrial, and in the language in here, it's 8 feet high. That's the proposal anyway, is 8 feet. Whether that should be the same for B3 as 8 feet security fences or not.
I mean, that's where the B3 along 169, some of them have 8-foot fences already, right?
Right,
So.
right.
I think so.
To be quite frank, yeah, because,
Yeah.
we didn't have,
'Cause
like I said, we didn't
When I
have. a
stand next to them,
permit
they feel taller
requirement
than me.
Until 2004, so a lot of those places, like Waite's been there since 1986 or whatever.
Yeah,
So,
Does barbed wire include razor wire?
that's separate line.
yeah,
Yes,
that's, yeah.
We're just talking barbed wire.
it's barbed wire.
Well, you have, right, you have barbed wire, you do have razor wire too. Is that something you would allow in industrial? As long as it's a, you know,
I don't think it matters if it's industrial setting, because.
I don't either.
You want security.
What's it used to be A and B. Now it's something else,
Yeah, collision place.
Yeah.
in the back of that, they had that little chain link fence there and it has a wire on top of it.
Yeah.
They have the air compressor and the other stuff.
I haven't been back there.
Razor wire?
I don't know if it's razor wire, but I'm just.
Yeah, I used to go by that a lot. I don't think it's razor. I think it's just.
Yeah,
barbed.
I personally don't recall seeing razor wire.
Razor
anywhere
wire
in
is pretty
town.
shiny.
I don't think I've ever seen razor. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, but they got
that
the
is
barbed wire.
B3, right?
A lot of it in Leavenworth.
No.
You're gonna see a lot of it. Go to Leavenworth.
But again, I think this highlights an issue. Any fence built prior to 2004, when the ordinance came in and started requiring permits for them, et cetera. It was kind of Katie bar the door, because if there was no permit required, there wasn't, there was literally 2 people in my entire department. Or that department, I wasn't here yet, but, and one was a building inspector and one was the development director. So the ability to check the 9.5 miles for new fences as they pop up just didn't happen.
So if we, here where we talk about razor wire, B3, like item number 5 there, you say 6 foot tall, but if we're gonna allow razor wire, should that be raised to 8 feet?
I think it said in the provision an additional 2 or something, how you had it written.
So, but in number 5, does that need to be, do we need to change it or is it okay? I just want to make sure we've got it.
I think we
Covered
just give
somewhere
Jack some
else.
parameters and let him give us
Yeah.
a draft.
If you don't want razor wire, it will be snuffed out of the language in all aspects of it. If the security apparatus part of the fence sticks out, we'll adjust it so that it moves it, so that doesn't hang over under the neighbor's
I don't
property.
think it matters in B3 district. I mean, you're not gonna have residential people walking
Yeah,
by.
I was gonna say B3 is
Yeah.
industrial. I can think of some businesses that would really want razor wire.
I mean.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's gonna be an issue unless.
From my
You
perspective, I don't
trespass
think
on it.
razor wire is necessary.
I think razor wire is gonna be more of a deterrent if it's on the ground in front of you than a
Yeah.
electric fence.
At least it worked that way in World War One, so. So, but yeah, so if we eliminate razor wire, we're talking barbed wire only, and then you do the security apparatus at the top of the fence that leans out, so it's harder to climb. I understand, we can just require that that face be that it doesn't go over onto your neighbor's property.
Which I think that'd be perfect.
So
Another reason
that's easy enough to,
isolate that.
craft. And then the last question is 8 foot in B3? Only if it's a security fence,
Are you saying the minimum 8 foot or are you saying?
maximum height
All right,
of
maximum.
the fence, and then you have security apparatus on top. Or is 6 foot with the security
No,
apparatus,
I think 8 foot.
8 foot?
You want that up there higher.
Up
Okay.
to,
Okay, that's easy enough to craft. So it's 8 foot in industrial and B3 only? Security apparatus, including barbed wire?
Guy put a limit on that. I'd say no more than 2
Constantine.
foot or 18 inches or something,
Yeah,
because you don't want somebody to put security.
Yeah.
20 foot
I
fence.
mean, I'd hate to see that.
Yeah.
If you don't put something maximum on there, somebody's gonna say,
Yeah.
well, I can do it.
Luckily, we're fortunate enough that we don't have a lot of B3 and I1 that's available, and not already built on, so.
What kind of fence does the marijuana facility have?
It's got a very tall chain link, all required by the state.
Yeah.
Constitution.
It's up.
actually.
You wanna go see it? It's up.
And to be quite frank, that's one of the reasons why this industrial stuff is, we haven't had industrial in Smithville. In years.
Taylor Plumbing,
Yeah.
Taylor Plumbing or Cabinet Shop probably.
Yeah. But if we're going to have more of that industrial production type
But it's
stuff,
in
they have
The
security.
park, the I1,
So-
that's the only I1 zone we got. Well,
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Pretty much.
but I think this allows for a private prison in places.
Mhm.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah.
Arthur.
So ultimately, I think,
that rabbit hole down at
Yeah.
another time.
yeah, and ultimately, the
Fine land.
there are different ways to look at that. It's, yeah,
Or
yeah,
whatever the law or state law requires is gonna supersede. it.
but ultimately here, I've got enough information to incorporate the vinyl fence. I can tweak the rest of it, and we can bring it forward for your final review in December to make a recommendation on with the changes you've suggested.
Oh, okay. One of my question is for this, and these people, they've got a 30-day thing hanging over their.
We've
head.
already pulled it.
Yeah.
It's already,
Yeah.
While we're reviewing it, there, it's
Yeah.
already taken care of.
While it's under discussion here and in the board, yeah, it's
That-
nuts
that's-
happening.
I want to be sure.
Yeah.
But they still need to get a permit.
Yeah, that's.
So that way they have that and in case
Yep,
of any
and we have a record.
grandfathering in the
yeah,
future, right?
We have a
Yeah.
record and all that other stuff, yep.
Any further discussion?
So you're gonna have.
I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
so moved. Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're adjourned.
Hit that gavel.
Wow.
That hasn't been out of the drawer for 3 years, 4 years. That's
She
the
needed-
judges.
She
She
needed that
needed-
last month.
She broke mine. I came in the other